The shoulders are out again because, again, it is unbelievably hot. And I'm British, so I will not stop talking about it. Hey, Spence, how's it going? It's Jamie. Welcome back to another video. I don't know, but welcome either way. And today I'm talking about something that I have already talked about on the channel, but I'm guessing a lot of you maybe have not seen the first time I spoke about this. Oh, yes. Basically, a while ago, my footage and images were used in a Tamil movie called Thittam Irandu without my permission. I was also misgendered in the film, and then when I spoke about it on my YouTube video and showed examples of how I was used in the movie, my video was copyright claimed and banned in like 98% of territories. So here I am making a follow-up, but without the content in it that got it copyright claimed the first time. So I basically can't show you what they used of mine in the film. Otherwise my video might get another copyright claim. Wow. So I'm basically going to go over what I covered in the first video. So like what the movie is about, how I am involved without my knowledge or consent. And then I'll get into some updates since I made that first video. Basically, as I said, a Tamil movie called Thittam Irandu, which translates as Plan B in English, used videos and images of me and some of my wife Shaba as well without our permission or knowledge. As far as I'm aware, it's broadcast in cinemas and it is on streaming services, and we only found out because some of you lovely spuds let us know. And we're like, hey, were you aware you were in this film? No, we were not. As a super quick rundown, the movie is an Indian crime thriller with romance. There's cop Athira who meets aspiring Dr. Arjun on a train. Long story short, the meeting ends with them deciding to get married. Alongside this romance story, Athira the cop is investigating the disappearance of her best friend from childhood. Eventually, she finds a body that is identified as her best friend, Surya, but is it really her? Is it really? Athira and Arjun are planning their wedding, but she is very distracted by the case and her friend's death, convinced that Surya is murdered and obviously wanting to track down the killer. Now here comes the plot twist. Haha. Upon re-examining the body, it turns out that it is not in fact Surya. Dun dun dun, nobody saw that one coming. The whole thing was apparently staged and Athira's friend is still missing, not murdered. So what's happened? Athira then suspects Surya's husband and he confesses that Surya was in love with somebody else. They conspired together, faked her own death so that she could run away and live this new life with the new person she was in love with without her family knowing. I'm keeping this very light on the specifics of the storyline and just giving you the very top level. So after some confusion about who could be involved in Surya's disappearance and what's happening, and then Athira thinking that Arjun could be the bad guy and he's kind of depicted as this villain character and it's built up for like, oh my goodness, he's scary. The big plot twist is revealed. Arjun is Surya. He is trans. They did not fake his death so that he could run off with somebody he was in love with. They faked his death so that he could live as himself. I personally do think it's pretty cool to see trans rep in this context, showing the lengths that he had to go to live freely as himself. We'll get into some more of the negatives in a moment. Athira is obviously and understandably overwhelmed by this information, and the film ends on a cliffhanger a year after all of this event happens in the reveal, with Athira meeting up with Arjun, but us as the viewers not knowing if they're gonna get married or not. Before we carry on and I get into my involvement and some discussions around the film's representation of a trans character, I wanted to address the fact that I was using she, her pronouns and the dead name for Arjun's character. I wouldn't, and nobody else should do this to a real trans person unless it's been explicitly stated by that trans person that that is something they want to happen and that they are comfortable with, as in being referred to by the pronouns of their assigned gender and their dead name when people are talking about them in the past. But because it's a fictional storyline and this is how it plays out in the movie, I wanted to tell it to you how you would experience it when watching the film, and the film uses those pronouns and the dead name throughout, before Arjun is revealed as being trans. But a friendly reminder to not dead name or misgender a trans person, even when talking about them in the past, unless they have explicitly stated that that's something they're comfortable with. A second disclaimer I want to make is that obviously I am talking about an Indian film, and South Asian culture is very different to the Western culture that I grew up with. That's why I've run this by my wife, who is South Asian and grew up watching South Asian TV and film. I'm also coming at this from talking from the perspective as a trans person, speaking on the trans representation in the movie, and as a trans person whose image was literally used as part of that trans storyline in the film, and my comments and criticisms are not that of South Asian movies or films generally. So first, let's talk about where I was in this movie. There's a scene where Arjun, who's pre-transition in this scene, his husband finds out that he is trans and gives a little speech, and his intentions are clearly very good and he is not transphobic and he is supportive and wanting to help Arjun through this. Arjun explains a dark past with his family and his current headspace. Trigger warning if you are planning on watching it, it is quite dark in that moment, but when his husband hears of all the pain that he is going through and experiencing, he basically says to Arjun, you don't have to deal with this pain. There is something you can do about it. Look. And the husband then goes on a computer and shows pre-transition Arjun images and footages of other trans men, including me, and Shaba, my wife, also makes an appearance. Now, this made me feel super conflicted because the DMs I were getting, a lot of people were excited to see us in this film, and Shaba in particular knows just how lacking LGBTQ plus rep can be in South Asian film, let alone positive rep, let alone positive trans rep, or trans rep that is coming from a good place even if not done perfectly. However, nobody asked if we wanted to be in this film, which is super important, especially when the storyline is very sensationalized, which we will get into. But most importantly is because they actually misgender me in this movie that is now immortalized forever, and they do it multiple times, and it really does not feel good at all. It feels very awkward and embarrassing and uncomfortable, and it's kind of triggering, and I'm just like, why is this happening? At the time that I made the first video, I wasn't 100% sure that they actually did misgender me in the original language of Tamil of the movie. I just knew that it showed up in the English subtitles and was like, well, even if they gendered me correctly, the English subtitles are not gendering me correctly, so if anyone's watching it with English subtitles, that kind of felt bad enough. However, from the first video, I have received multiple comments from viewers who speak Tamil confirming that I was both misgendered in the English subtitles and the original Tamil language of the movie. Yay. Tamil speak here, Jamie was called a girl. It's wrong that Jamie was in the movie without his permission, of course, was misgendered. As a native Tamil speaker, I'm embarrassed that any filmmaker would include you in a movie without your consent and while misgendering you. As a person who speaks Tamil, Jamie was called a girl and pronouns she, her were used for him. I'm sorry that my people misgendered you, Jamie. I super appreciate the confirmation because it's just kind of good to know for sure. It does feel embarrassing and degrading, to be honest, even if the film's intentions were positive, that both my content was used without my consent or knowledge and that I was misgendered multiple times in this film. Not great. I'm all up for being involved in things that are there to increase awareness around trans people and trans representation and all of this stuff. I love it. But I obviously want to know how my clips would be used and how my image would be used in this setting, how I would be referred to and spoken about, and the general tone of the piece that would include my footage. And I think more importantly, if you make people aware that you would like to use their footage, they can also come on board and help advise on the representation so that it can be done appropriately, and let people know, let filmmakers know how the correct way to refer to somebody is. So if they want to use my images, they could have spoken to me about it, let me know the tone of the piece, and let me have a say on whether I was involved, and if I were involved, how that would be and how they should refer to me. And personally, if I had had that opportunity to hear about the film's approach and tone and everything before being included in it, I wouldn't have chosen to be in it in its current form. I also definitely wouldn't have wanted to take away an opportunity from the so many amazing LGBTQ plus South Asian people that there are out there who could have had this opportunity to be involved and / or consulted with this film and done it in a much better way than I ever could. Honestly, the worst bit for me personally is the misgendering. It just feels so icky and also easily avoidable, which makes it feel really frustrating, especially as the misgendering was actually in the present tense when they're talking about me now, not just talking about me in the past. Like, that just felt like a really big faux pas. I think when you have these opportunities to represent such an underrepresented group within a film like this, it's so important to get the representation correct, because you could be somebody's very first introduction to the trans community and to language that would be used towards trans people. And by misgendering a trans man and referring to a trans man as a girl would make some people watching that think that that is how they should refer to a trans man and that it's okay to do that. Especially as the film was coming at this from a place of an attempt at a positive representation, it sends even more clearly a message to even people who are aiming to be allies that misgendering is acceptable, or even that I personally use she, her pronouns, and even giving the impression to some people that trans people aren't really their gender. The timeline of my transition was misrepresented as well, and it may seem like a smaller thing compared to the other things, which it is, but I wanted to bring it up because it all feeds into this idea of, if you want to do positive trans rep, good trans rep, and potentially the first time people are seeing trans people in film, it's so important to get it accurate. In the film, changes that I experienced over the course of about 6 years were described as happening in one. I wish that would have been lovely. As funny as it might seem, it is also damaging to the trans community because it can give false hope, and to those who don't understand the process because it just feeds into this notion that false information can spread, and it can spread so easily, and it's really hard to dismantle that once it's out there, especially if the people watching are not trans friendly. It gives ammunition for them to then further spread the false information of,
oh, look at what can happen in a year, look at how how powerful and dangerous and irreversible this process is, and look at how quickly it can happen.
When it's just not true. I also wanted to talk about the portrayal of trans people generally, especially the main character, Arjun, as he is the trans character, right? Firstly, I want to really praise the fact that there was a trans character in a South Asian film. And as I mentioned earlier, I can see it was coming from a positive place, and an attempt was made to do a good job. It wasn't there to vilify trans people or feed into lies about trans people. We saw compassion from other characters towards the trans character. I also appreciate the fact that the trans storyline was woven into a much larger plot and wasn't the focus of the whole movie. That's quite cool to me and is not something I've seen done a huge amount generally. Even within Western films and TV where LGBTQ plus representation is more frequent and trans storylines come up more generally, often those trans storylines and those trans characters are just all about their transness. So it was quite nice to see this different storylines weaving in together. And there was definitely a level of respect taken when doing this storyline. It highlighted the difficulty of non-acceptance and how much impact that can have on somebody's life, and also how culture can play a huge part in this. I felt like overall the movie had the tone of, hey, it's okay to accept a trans person, and also showing the difficulties that trans people face with being accepted, and then how difficult it is when they're not accepted. However, there were some quite big not so great things about the trans rep as well in this film, and some things that were quite problematic as well. I think it started out having really good intentions but went a bit wayward, and I wanted to have a chat about that too. One thing that isn't a criticism for me is the sensationalism of the storyline. I realize that might sound a bit contradictory, but I had a chat with Shaba about it, and she explained that within Indian films, huge dramatic plot twists and storylines that feel very over the top and unrealistic in many ways are just in the nature of the movies. But even though there's this shock factor, efforts should still be taken, I think, to respect the experience of the story you're trying to tell. So I think you could have a story with shocking plot twists and like over the top drama and it be very in line with a typical movie that would be made in the culture, while still respecting the fact that you're trying to give positive trans representation and not letting the trans rep get drawn too much into that. Firstly, as a general overview and general negative point, the actors were all cis, and they had two different actors play the trans character pre and post transition. There also feels like there was an obvious lack of trans consultancy in the making of the film, from things like the language used, the plot line, and the writing, etc. And this kind of encapsulates where all the problems stem from for me personally. And all could have been solved by casting a trans actor and consulting with trans people when writing the script. Personally, I'm just like, listen to marginalized communities if you are going to be using them in films and using their stories. The use of two very different cis actors, a cis woman to play the pre-transition trans man and a cis man to play the post-transition trans man, led to quite an unrealistic portrayal of what the transitioning process can look like, including things like the timeline and what it can do. I mean, the character literally got quite a lot taller, which is not going to happen, and apparently grew a very magnificent beard in under a year. I'm not saying the beard bit is totally impossible, but I've never seen it happen that fast. I have seen some trans men get very magnificent beards quite quickly, but it's always taken a few years. Secondly, there were quite a lot of inaccuracies around what transitioning is actually like. There's a scene where they show Arjun's transition journey. They talk about stem cell treatment. I don't even know what they mean by that. I could just be totally unaware of something, but I have no clue. And another inconsistency is the character is injecting testosterone intravenously when testosterone injections are intramuscular. It sounds nitpicky, but I just think it's really important to show things accurately, in my opinion, for both trans people watching that to get an accurate idea, and also for cis people to not misunderstand anything about the transition process. He also injects at this super random time, like he's in acute need of testosterone right then and there. He needs some kind of boost. That doesn't happen. Testosterone shots will be very much overseen by a doctor about how spaced out they are. They'll be done in specific parts of the body, intramuscular, and would not be done in like the heat of a moment when you are feeling very stressed and you've got something else to do. It's not like I need testosterone right now. It's like, oh, today is my shot day because it has been 3 weeks since my last testosterone injection. Better do that. I appreciate that unless they literally filmed the movie over a long period of time following somebody's genuine transition, or they found a trans man who was then happy to play a woman role before transition, they would need to use different actors in this scenario. But in my opinion, they could have at least cast a trans man to play the trans man. I just think if that was a possibility, that would have been great. Thirdly, the language used was not fantastic. There were several language problems around the discussion of trans people. There were instances of things like women who want to be men and change your gender, which is just quite outdated terminology now and not really how things should be phrased. I think language is super important, and whilst it was amazing to see trans rep and the trans storyline in an Indian movie, I think it would have been so much better and more powerful if the representation was correct and the language was correct and current, and the positive impact could have been so much bigger and more meaningful. And again, this all could have been fixed by consulting trans people prior to making the movie. Fourth, some of the language wasn't just problematic, it was downright damaging. Aside from the misgendering, there's a bit where the character who is the husband of pre-transition Arjun tells Arjun that there are criminals of a certain dark nature living free in the world, and so therefore it's okay for him to be trans. Yay! I don't really understand why this felt like a necessary or appropriate comparison. I can see the sentiment behind it, but it's just problematic. There is a large history of LGBTQ+ people being called groomers and similar things, and although there isn't a direct comparison in the movie or saying that one thing is like the other, by saying that one gets away with criminal activities so therefore it's okay to be trans feels very bizarre. Even if it's not intended, it's demeaning the trans experience and making a connection between criminals of a certain nature and trans people, and it will inevitably lead some people to make this jump between the two and form an automatic connection between them when that wouldn't be the right thing to do. This isn't the worst example I've seen of this kind of thing happening when there's trans rep and trans characters, but it just felt so unnecessary. It was really frustrating. The final big point I wanted to make was the overall trans storyline and how the trans character was revealed. It involved a lot of deception, and I appreciate and understand the deceptiveness when it came to Arjun's family where there were safety threats. So that's not the kind of deception I'm talking about. It's his deception in his relationship with Athira that's not so great, and that is very typical for South Asian movies to be very dramatic and plot twisty, but we also have to recognize that we can respect that art form and stay true to it whilst also respecting the people that we're trying to represent within that art form. It's okay for films to be dramatic and have really out there storylines that are like, wow, this is so impossible but amazing, but you can do it in a way that doesn't villainize a marginalized character, so that doesn't villainize a trans person when there is no need to. So the whole meet cute between Athira and Arjun on the train right at the beginning turned out to be a setup, and done deliberately by Arjun to see if Athira would fall in love with him. He subsequently led her to believe that her best friend had been murdered, that's his pre-transition self, and only confessed the truth when she was getting close to figuring things out and thought that he might have some kind of involvement. It is controversial to portray trans people as liars and deceivers, especially when it comes to being in relationships, even when there were good intentions behind it. It's really such a trope that trans people are trying to move away from, and it is such a misinformation and a label that is put on trans people so frequently that we are liars and deceivers, because it just isn't true. So it's quite harmful to represent the trans community in that way. It also suggests that trans people maybe aren't able to find love without being deceitful, which absolutely isn't the case and isn't something we should be reinforcing to trans people, because a lot of trans people believe that they're not worthy of love because they are trans, and that is not the truth whatsoever. But it's also something we shouldn't be reinforcing to cis people either, even on a subconscious level. A lot of trans people are called deceptors and liars for one reason or another. So to show a storyline where a trans character actually is being deceptive and sneaky and lying, it's a really tricky place to go, and it's not somewhere I would advise going. Arjun actually says a line to Athira of, "Yes, I lied, but not because I wanted to cheat you, only because I want to live with you," indicating that he lied to get into a relationship with her, which is problematic in its own way when it comes to things like informed consent, and not just as a trans storyline, just any kind of lying to get somebody in a relationship when you felt like if you told the truth they wouldn't want that. It's tricky in a general sense. And then finally, for the build-up of the last big reveal bit of the movie, Arjun is portrayed as the suspected villain. There's multiple moments where, as a viewer, you're like, wow, this dude is intense. He might murder his fiance. What is going on? Is he the big bad guy we've been warned about? Like, seriously, it's building for a murder. He brings weapons and everything. But then, oh wait, it's all good. It's okay. He's just trans. It feels a bit odd. Yeah. You can see where the film is trying to go, and honestly, some bits are done well, but they really just needed to speak to some trans people before making it. Good intentions, misguided execution. So that's kind of the rundown of what I covered in the first video, but hopefully with nothing that is going to get me flagged for copyright this time. So what's happened since? Well, my video was copyright claimed because I included bits of the movie that used my images and one small clip depicting Arjun's transition montage because I spoke about how it was quite unrealistic and I wanted to show that. It feels super ironic that me talking about my clips being used without my consent or knowledge in something that I can't just click a button and copyright claim against would then be copyright copyright claimed against. I think I only used like 5 seconds at a time a few times throughout the entire video. And since that happened, management I've worked to have tried to reach out to the filmmakers and the distributors, including Sony, and have not had a response from anybody. I've also reached out via email and Instagram DM to the director of the film with no response. I'm also starting conversations if I want to start pursuing this legally in any way, as I've not had a response, but I need to weigh up the literal cost benefit of doing so because legal things are not cheap, right? And I'm currently unsure of what my chances are of achieving anything would actually be, because some advice I've had is that it's a good idea to pursue this legally. Other advice I've had is that it would literally be a dead end because there is nothing I can do. So I don't know. Interestingly, it's on the Wikipedia page about the movie that my content was used without my consent and that I was misgendered. It was very interesting. This is like a little side comment, but the film sparked controversy due to the inclusion of English YouTuber Jamie Rains, Jammidodger. Rains is a trans man who is featured in the film without his consent and is misgendered. The film also misrepresents his gender transition as having taken place within a year, despite actually having occurred over at least a 6-year period, according to Rains. Rains attempted to contact the creators of the film but received no response. Rains would later create a YouTube video in response to the film on the 10th of December 2023, though this video would be copyright claimed by the aforementioned creators and blocked for 98% of Rains' audience. And then I made a short about it as well. So yes, I'm guessing that that was literally just added to the wiki page by someone who watched my video about it. But I wanted to make this follow-up video because my first video is not watchable and I wanted this to be a conversation that lived on my channel. That's my main purpose for making this video, just to explain what happened, how I feel about it, and post it in a way that means it can't be hidden again. So if anybody knows anything I can do about this beyond just talking about it online, some advice would be greatly appreciated, as I'm not really sure what to do next, to be honest. I have no idea what would be a good path of action, but it is something that continues to make me feel uncomfortable every time I remember that it's a thing out there. Like, it just really gives me the ick and makes me feel very awkward that there is a literal film on there that you can stream on well-known streaming platforms that misgenders me. There's like images and videos of my face, of me, and I'm named, and they misgender me. It's very awkward and they didn't have my permission, and I just really don't like it. It should just be very typical and standard that, especially with like these major production movies, that they are getting consent from the people they are including in this film. This is not something that should be happening. This isn't just a YouTube video that used a second clip of something else. This is a movie many people have seen and will continue to live on out there, had budget behind it, and was made by like a professional team and had Sony as a distributor, and they used people's content without consent. That just isn't right. So thank you for watching my video about it. Leave your comments down below if you've got any thoughts. If you are interested in supporting me, you can head over to my Patreon, where you can get access to exclusive content. There are some names going up the side of the screen, which are some of my Patreons, and I also want to say a big shout out to my top tier Patreons: Albar, Chloe, Elden K, Gosco, Iona Balash, Jesse Entwistle, Marv Mallow, Max Makes Mods, Night Soul, Nesta, Rachel Raptor, Randy, River Champagne, Ry Loves Rory, Sienna Lamb, Slayer, Sugar Joe, The Third Hat Man, TNS Mum, Sally Drew, and Sarah Hobbs. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. Much love. Bye.